You may know him best from Instagram, but Alexander Mills has a history in coffee far beyond that little app. Alex has been writing about coffee on his blog, Alexander Mills Coffee, for years, catering to helping the home brewer brew better coffee. He is the founder of coffeeclub.ca. He owns and operates a mobile cafe called Groundswell Coffee Company, which is awesome that you're doing that. That's like a dream of mine. And he's probably working on something else he hasn't told you about. Regardless of where you've crossed paths with him, Alex's passion is to help increase the coffee literacy of everyone who enjoys this beverage, from the coffee curious, as he likes to call them, to the coffee crazy. He's very intentional in the way he approaches how we talk about what we talk about in this industry, and the result is building bridges with words. That is like my bio as well, like coffee curious people, all that sort of thing. First of all, thank you, Alex, for being here. Share a couple words. What are you excited for tonight, and what are you brewing, man?
I'm excited for this, Michael. I really appreciate you having me. I was thinking earlier today about our history together and how we've been connected on Instagram for like a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while. I was trying to think in that, like earlier upstairs, I'm like, I've been following for a while, like a really long time.
Yeah, and we've chatted probably more. We chat in the DMs all the time, and I can say this positively, that you are the funniest person that I've chatted with.
It's all just been like the most random, like sarcastic comments ever. It's never like serious stuff.
And you know what? It's perfect because it breaks up the inbox. It's like it breaks up all the questions, and like sometimes
that's true. I have thought about that. Yeah.
A message from Michael, and it's like I'm literally going to laugh out loud. So,
it's always the most stupid stuff ever. I'm like, it's all like dad jokes times 1,000.
Yeah, but no, man, I appreciate having me. I think what you're doing here is really cool. We were just chatting before we hopped on here about Twitch and streaming, and I think bringing coffee and specialty coffee into this space is, I think it's a perfect time for that. I think you're the perfect person for it. So
thank you.
I'm happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to reiterate, this is Copy Episode 2, and Episode 1 was about specialty coffee. We talked with Trevor Graham. If you have not seen that episode, be sure to go to the YouTube and subscribe to it, because Coffee Episode 1 kind of lays the foundation of what specialty coffee is. It's not this, this like cloud in the sky, like what is it? It's just super simple, connecting, networking, common interests of coffee, quality coffee, and it was absolutely fun to talk with him about it. So we're on episode 2 here, which we're going to be talking about tasting notes of coffee. And the reason why I was thinking about what would be episode 2, because a lot of my interactions with people has always led with 100% the taste of the coffee that I'm drinking. If I'm sharing with coffee, that's my introduction of, oh, what are you drinking? Oh, I'm drinking this coffee. It tastes like this, or it tastes like this. And to me, that's always been my introduction to other people of sharing coffee and letting them know, hey, you may taste this, you may taste this. And it connects the dots for someone who's curious of like, oh my gosh, I tasted that. Oh my gosh, this is what it tasted like. And so that's why I wanted to pick episode 2 to briefly talk about tasting notes of coffee, because it's very simple, but it's also very complex. There's a lot of nuances and there's a lot of detail and time that you can dedicate to tasting coffee, obviously, because there's a whole side of tasting coffee that's far beyond like, oh, this tastes like blueberries. Like it's crazy. The world, when you get in specialty coffee, it's crazy.
Right. Or this just tastes like coffee, right?
Yeah.
And like we all know what that tastes like. Regardless of how long we've been drinking specialty coffee, we can all remember, and it's that classic diner coffee. It's Dunkin' Donuts. It's
exactly
that coffee that just tastes like coffee. But yeah, man, there's a whole new world out there, and some of the language we use to talk about what we taste is just like ridiculous, and some of it is a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're gonna get into it for sure.
Perfect. And we're gonna break down a couple things. We got people in chat. Joe Star, Loot, what's up, guys? Missing some quality coffee. Joanne, you got to get some quality coffee again. We talked about this. You had the French press going on. You got to get back on the horse, because your life will just be sad.
That's a fact.
I'm not kidding. Side note, like there's so many people that I've destroyed their daily cup of coffee because I've shared like a good V60 or a good ratio brew with them, and they walk away like, I can't taste and enjoy Keurig anymore. It's upsetting.
Yeah.
That's like my favorite thing.
Instagram the other day, like, do you have like a forget how they asked the question, but basically, like, do you ever drink just like crappy coffee? And I said no, like, not that there's any shame in that. I know plenty of people who love specialty coffee and still like have that nostalgic place for
absolutely
coffee. But that is just not for me. Once you get to a certain place,
it's hard to go back. I'd hate to say it, and that makes you sound like the classic you're a coffee snob sort of thing. But it's just like quality coffee, once you have a taste of it, it's like I can't risk it. Like, what if this coffee, this diner coffee I just had is the end of my life, and that was the last experience I have.
Yeah.
Like,
and you know what? There's no shame in choosing to abstain.
There's not. No, absolutely not.
You don't want to have like a less than superior product, because like we all do that in certain areas of our lives, like whether it's food or drink, like wine. You know, people who drink really expensive wine, they don't drink cheap wine anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's no shame in that, in abstaining.
There's not. No,
you don't have to be a snob about it, but there's no shame in abstaining.
No, absolutely. Which brings us to this. So, a couple things. We will be brewing again, guys. Another cup of coffee tonight via V60 here on our brew cam. I'm just calling that. Just made it up. It's a brew cam. We'll blamo. A V60, real simple. We will actually be brewing some Mad Lab coffee here. Will Blam from Los Angeles, my buddy Andrew Sinclair, his shop there. He's always brought in some really delicious cups of coffee, and we're gonna brew that tonight. And we'll be talking about this coffee as well as some other coffees. But Alex, what are you drinking tonight? Tell us a little bit about your coffee.
I'm drinking a coffee, and just before we went live, the countdown screen was on. It's like, how many seconds do I have? Because I wanted to run and go get this tin. So this coffee's from Corvus. They're in Colorado, I think. They call it Santa Maria.
Corvus. Yeah.
So Santa Maria is probably the name of the farm. It's from Peru, and it's an anaerobic process. The variety is Caturra. And the way they describe it, and this is, if you've ever shopped in specialty coffee and bought a bag for yourself, you've probably encountered tasting notes of different varieties, different expressions of tasting notes, and this is how Corvus,
they did. A lot of people do it differently.
Yeah, so they just describe this coffee as a sensational and juicy Peruvian with exciting florals and bright guava.
There you go.
This is my first cup of this coffee. I brewed it on the origami dripper tonight, and it's a little bit under extracted, which just means that I'll probably grind a little finer next time. And it's still good though. It's like I get the guava thing that they're going after. I used to eat guavas when I lived in Uganda. Actually, I have some fruit right now. I'm getting like some graham cracker. It's reminding me of like a sweet, savory pastry, something like that. But yeah, it's tasting really good.
Perfect. So I'm going to start brewing some coffee. So the first question, Alex, that I want us to elaborate on, I'll switch between brew camera as well as what you're talking about. And I'll kind of hit the steps of what we're exactly brewing here. But, talking with someone who is not deep in the specialty coffee realm, they're looking at a bag of coffee and they're saying tasting notes of, like what you said, juicy with florals and guava. You explain it very well, because this is your craft. This is what you do daily. This is what you grind for. This is what you constantly train for. You're researching and doing all this information from your blog to your Instagram to people that you work with to your coffee business and all that. What's a very simple way of explaining how we should interpret tasting notes that are on coffee from coffee roasters that listed on there, whether that's specialty or whether it may be from a bag of Starbucks at the store. It's a little bit different because they're not really like, oh, this bond roast tastes like this. It's always just like medium, but maybe distinguish between that and hit that a little bit of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So since you're going to start brewing coffee, I'll take a little bit of time to answer this question, because
exactly.
I had a conversation yesterday with a grape farmer that just kind of added to this, this story that I like to tell about tasting notes and flavors and just tasting in general. So I was talking to this grape farmer, and he's grown grapes his whole life. And I live in wine country here in Niagara, and it was pretty common. Like everywhere you look, there's vineyards. And we were talking about this very thing, about different varieties of grapes compared to different varieties of coffees. And then we started talking about how these two products, wine and coffee, are marketed, and they're marketed totally differently. So when you go to the store, the wine store, I guess, and you shop for a wine, you're predominantly shopping by variety, whether you know it or not. So whether you know that
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
or Cab Franc or Syrah or Cab Sauv, whether you know that those are varieties of grapes or not, that's how you're shopping. You know that a Merlot, you know that you like a Merlot and you don't like a Riesling. And those are great varieties.
Yeah. And it's all broken up. It's all sectioned out. If you pay attention, it's,
exactly. Yeah, so it's sold by variety and not categorized by flavor notes. And then if you take a closer look at a wine label, you may find flavor notes on a wine label, but very rarely, if ever, are they on the front. They're kind of just buried on the back because predominantly wine is marketed by variety. Now, contrast that to coffee, and specifically specialty coffee. Coffee is marketed by flavor and by tasting notes. And that can be a blessing and a curse. And here's the most, I guess, predominant problem that I see amongst people who are just learning how to experience specialty coffee is they have a fine time shopping by flavor notes. They look at a bag and they hear strawberry or blueberry and they think, that sounds amazing. They take that bag home and they start brewing the coffee. And inevitably, they can't get what they're tasting to line up perfectly to those 3, 4, sometimes 5 tasting notes on the bag. And when that happens, you inevitably think one of a few things. You either think, I brewed this wrong, or you think, I am broken. I can't taste this good enough.
Right.
And either of those things leave you feeling like kind of crappy about the whole experience. It leaves something to be desired. And herein lies the problem. It's that tasting notes are not objective.
Right.
The coffee that you're drinking, like I looked it up on the internet, and the tasting notes are tropical, which is pretty broad. That's a category, I guess.
Yeah.
Guava, confectioner's sugar, and mastery, which is kind of a funny one. But let's talk about guava for a second. So, and which is perfect because my coffee here has a flavor note of guava as well. And I have guavas in the fridge, and I used to eat guavas and flirt with my girlfriend then by picking her guavas when we were in Uganda.
Take note, people. If you need to pick up a future spouse, you pick guavas. Hopefully
you
it was
start
the same
climbing
spouse.
Trees and harvesting fruit. And whether she likes guavas or not, it's all about the romantic gesture. But so when I drink this coffee, I am familiar with guava. Why? Because I've had it before. And so when I'm tasting this coffee, I have a memory associated with guava.
Right.
And I can agree, this coffee tastes like guava or not. But here's the thing, Michael. If you've never had guava, which plenty of people in the West
I've never had guava.
Exactly. So you're drinking that coffee and you read guava on the label, and you either think, I'm not going to be able to taste this because I've never tasted it before. Mm-hmm. Or if you don't taste it, you don't quite have that deep of a thought. You think, well, maybe I brewed it wrong. So you start trying to mess with it. But the only problem is you've never had guava before, but the person who wrote that note on the bag has. So here's the thing. Tasting notes are completely subjective. They are dependent on an experience that you have had in the past. So the person who roasted that coffee and cupped that coffee clearly has had guava before. But if you haven't, that's okay. You can use the language that you have based off the experiences that you've had to describe that coffee exactly how it tastes to you. And so for me, any tasting note, any attempt to describe how something tastes, specifically coffee, is an attempt to describe one of 3 things: acidity, sweetness, and body. So anytime you look at a coffee bag and you see tasting notes, they're just an attempt to describe acidity, sweetness, and body, and using experiences that person who wrote those notes on the bag, using those experiences they had. You've had a whole different set of experiences. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then just to go to our brew cam here. So again, we just did a real simple V60 brew. We did it on our first episode. Check it out if you want to. We did 20 grams of coffee and we yielded 300 grams. So real simple 1:15 ratio, nothing super crazy. But we just want to taste this specific coffee with what we're talking about, which is the Mad Lab Geisha, the tropical guava sugar, confectioner sugar. See, that's an interesting flavor because confectioner sugar, that's not my go-to. Like I'm gonna go try this bag of like it gets on my fingers and you taste it, and it's not like,
Right.
oh, this is something that I want in my coffee. And like you said, they're using those words to briefly describe, based on their experience, what that kind of ties to. And you can almost go into. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, confectioner sugar is obviously an attempt to describe sweetness.
Yeah, exactly.
And guava is likely an attempt to describe the acidity.
And confectioner sugar probably sounds better than just sugar.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
With that, and we have a question. So Joe Star says, do tasting notes change with roasting techniques? Have you roasted your own beans, Alex?
I'll answer the last question first. I haven't roasted my own beans,
But I'm sure you will one day.
I know. I feel like there are enough people doing really great work, roasting really great coffee, that I don't need a space in that place, you know?
I have heard you say that before.
Yeah. And so, not to say that there's anything wrong with home roasting. I think that's a fun hobby for people. But for me, it's like, I just want to buy really well roasted coffee. And
absolutely.
Up a bunch of green coffee at home. But when it comes to tasting notes changing with roasting techniques, think about it this way. When you take a piece of sourdough bread, if you've had sourdough bread, and you eat it, just in its bread form without toasting it, it's going to taste a certain way. It's going to be chewy, fluffy. It might even have a bit of a sour tang. When you put it in the toaster, let's say for 2 minutes, it's going to come out warm, but not quite brown. So it might taste a little different. Put it in for 4 minutes. It's going to come out a little bit brown, and you're going to notice that you get to taste that toast a little bit, right? Toast tastes different from bread. That's why we toast bread. Put it in for 6 minutes. It's going to taste pretty toasty. Put it in for 8 minutes or 10 minutes. Now it's burnt. It tastes totally different.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's the same way with coffee. Coffee beans are essentially toasted, they're roasted. And to the point that they're roasted, kind of dictates how they're going to taste. So lighter roasted coffees tend to have a more broad spectrum of flavor profiles. Just like you can taste the sour tang in a very lightly toasted sourdough, but not in a very toasted one.
Right.
And darker roasted coffees are going to have that smoky, kind of ashy sometimes, tobacco, chocolate, kind of roast profile. And I would go as far as to suggest that when you get to that point, you're actually tasting more of the roast than you are of the originality of the coffee itself. So I hope that makes sense.
No, and it does. And there's a reply to Mr. Bam Bam here. That's Trevor Graham from Sabbath Coffee Roasters, episode 1 alumni.
And he's pretty pumped up about coffee talk. I love that.
Yeah, it was a great episode that we talked about. Again, guys, if you have questions, feel free to ask questions. We have a wealth of knowledge in front of us, and let's find out what he knows exactly. My other question for you, and this is kind of a comment as well, is that you could almost, when you probably do this, which I've heard you say that you do this, is that when you get a cup of coffee, you don't even look at the tasting notes. You're like out the door with them. Correct, right? Like when you grab a bag of coffee, that's not your first reference, right?
It's really not, and that is just that's just personal preference.
No, it's a rule. It's a rule of law.
No, it's not a prescription. Like
it's
I'm not saying everyone should do that.
No.
But
what does it remove? What does it remove from you when you're experiencing coffee for the first time?
It just removes that bias, right? I'm not looking at the coffee expecting it to be something. I want to explore it for myself. Not to say that I never look at the tasting notes eventually.
Yeah, of course.
But I do, and I guess subconsciously, or maybe it's not subconscious, it's actually a pretty conscious effort. I'm trying to train myself to shop by variety.
Okay.
Much like wine. So I'm trying to learn what, when I'm sipping on this is a Caturra variety I'm drinking right now. Like, I want to explore Caturra and log the characteristics that Caturra has.
Right.
So that I have that library of information, and eventually I'll be able to shop coffee by variety as opposed to by flavor notes. So kind of like reverse engineering the marketing.
Right. And my approach has always been, I've always been like a location and process type of person when it comes to buying a bag of coffee, like deciding. Yep. And then depending on, I love coffees that are more on the fruity side, the citrusy side, all those, because I'm always just blown away, like oh my gosh, like this is delicious. Oh, this is so good. Like, versus like like, there's been a couple of coffees that I can say for sure, like, oh wow, this has been exactly what the tasting notes have said. Sure. Like you said, a lot of it's been based on experience. I could remember, I'm not kidding, a bag of coffee from Five Elephants, which is a roaster out in Germany. I had a bag of theirs, and it was in El Salvador, and it was like blueberry pie. I'm not kidding. Like, I love pie, but it was so fruity and so sweet. I was like, I'm gonna remember this coffee forever. And that was 4 years ago. Like, it was forever ago. And so a lot of the times when I'm looking at bags of coffee, I enjoy coffees that are more fruity, that are maybe florally, because that is a specific profile that I can't always pick out when I don't know what I'm drinking, if that makes sense. Like, it's a good reference for me to train myself in that way. And that's a whole other side of when you're brewing a cup of coffee, of exactly how you're training to, in my opinion, when I'm training or doing what you're doing, when I hear what you're saying, is that it affects my enjoyability of the coffee in the long run. Like, I enjoy researching more, enjoy discovering more about specific coffees or processes and why they're so delicious, or how this was roasted. That's just something that when I'm like being like conscious of that's what benefits me, is that I'm learning and wanting to discover more, because this coffee was so delicious. Does that make sense?
Totally. And you and I are on the pretty far end of the coffee snobbery spectrum. Most people, dude, like, and we kind of exist in this echo chamber on Instagram, right, of the specialty coffee world, but most people drink coffee like just want what they want, and they want it to taste either familiar or they find something that they're really into, and like they just want that to be repeatable. And someone like you or I are like probably super excited to like tour the globe as far as like, what the world has to offer in different flavor profiles and such. And so that there's no shame in shopping coffee with that intention, with trying to find the thing that you like. You know, like if you're super into low elevation Brazilian coffees because they're pretty low in acidity and they kind of always have this chocolatey, earthy vibe, then that's great. Like, just go after Brazilian coffees. If you're super into wash coffees and like don't care for, fermented naturals, then like, absolutely. Get it. Like, there's nothing wrong with just dialing in on that certain specific type of coffee. And I think that's like, if you were to poll the world's coffee drinkers, that's surely how most people, what they want out of their coffee is like, I want the same experience every day.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can find that by exploring origins, varieties, and by extension, tasting notes, for sure.
Yeah, and that's I'm thinking of my brother right now. This is kind of cool. He along with my whole family, when I got into specialty coffee in general, to give a bit of background of my experience in specialty coffee, I hated coffee up until 18, 19 years old. I hated coffee. It was bitter. My experience was bitter, tobacco, aftertaste, gross, bad breath, whatever. And that was directly from the classic, like, oh, my dad would always drink this Colombian, 100% Colombian coffee. It was a grayish gold tin, and he has tons of them filled with just random stuff because they're empty and all that. This is like, everybody has that experience. And so I never drank coffee up until like 18, 19 years old. And the experience was, I was working at Target as a team lead there, so manager there, and they were remodeling the Starbucks there, and they needed someone to move over, and they were doing a pay raise sort of thing. And so in my mind, I was like, yo, there's money there, so let me take on to be basically a store manager for a Starbucks in a Target, right? Which is like, you don't drink coffee, so why are you being... I'm like, I don't care. I'll fake it till I make it. I'll force myself to drink coffee. I found that blonde roast. I'm like, this is tolerable. I see a little bit of speck. I would see a little bit of speck of what coffee could be. But the rest was just terrible bitter. Like, it was just gross, because there's nothing wrong with Starbucks. When you know how it works and what the bean quality is and the differences in worlds, it does leave an impression on you. Trevor says 100% Colombian coffee is my favorite. That's like all the description. That's what the description was. It wasn't anything else. It was just 100% Colombian.
Yeah.
Sounds legit.
Yeah.
Anyways, and so from Starbucks, I met my wife and got married in 2014. I worked there for 2 years. And I began to, there was a coffee shop in Salt Lake that was called Cafe de Bola. The guy he's like a connoisseur. Like he loves this craft. Like he spent so many years in Japan, and he makes an incredible siphon coffee, which not a lot of people make really good, really good, consistent siphon coffee.
True.
If you don't know what it is, Google it, siphon coffee. And it's like, it was really good. And he walks you through this whole experience. He says, if you're going to order this, it was like a $13 cup of coffee, which to people is like, oh, 13. Now I'm like 13. I mean, if it's a good cup of coffee, stand by the price. You learn your lesson once. If it's a good cup of coffee, if not, then you'll come back. And so he really broke down this whole presentation. He said, if you're going to order this, you have to stay here for 25 minutes, sit down and stay here while I brew this cup of coffee. Brews it in front of you, and he gives you the whole spiel of what would be considered the third wave coffee, of how, it started with the first wave being, coffee makers and just coffee in general, like at your house, just the simple coffee, Mr. Coffee sort of thing. Second wave being Starbucks and things being accessible while you're driving out and about, right? Coffee shops opening up, big chain, Dunkin' Donuts, all that stuff. And then he talked about, the third wave and what it is and quality and all that. And he really sparked my curiosity, because the cup of coffee he brewed me was like delicious for not having coffee. I was like, I can drink this every day. Like if my coffee tastes like this, like tea, very tea-like, it was very tea-like, I'm like, I can enjoy this cup of coffee. And so I started looking at different, on Instagram, different coffee roasters, diving into their quality, the coffee that they were roasting, the descriptive words and all that. And I ended up actually, getting a subscription of all things to 3000 Thieves. I'm not sure if they're out in Australia. I was like, babe, we're gonna get this coffee. I got my V60 brew. I still have the same plastic V60 that I got from them, and they were constantly shipping me coffee from Australia. And I started making content, and I started working with them, and so they kept on sending stuff for content and all that. And it opened up my world to like what coffee could taste like, because I was learning the tools to brew a good cup of coffee through that V60. And the V60 is very consistent. As soon as you find your recipe, you find your grind, your water, your agitation, all that, which we talked about in the first episode, you can brew a consistent cup of coffee. I'm to the point, and I'm sure you are too, in a way where when you're brewing coffee, you're not really thinking about a recipe of like, okay, 100 grams, okay, 100 grams, 100 grams. It's all just like, okay, it's dripping and you're brewing it and you're adding more water and you just kind of know, and it's just consistent. And the delicious cups of coffee that I've had from Australia has put Australia on the map in my head of like, oh my gosh, their coffee, the quality that they have and the roasting profile, it's like delicious. It's just so fruity, so citrusy, like very like raspberry tea. It's like mind blowing, the world of coffee out there that coffee roasters they're sourcing in and they're roasting. It's like such delicious cups of coffee.
Yeah, it's funny once you kind of step your toe into these waters.
Oh my gosh, it's like you can't go back.
Yeah, you just realize that the world of coffee is bigger than you ever imagined. And I think too, like by extension, you realize that the world is just bigger than you ever imagined, because when you get more familiar with the coffee you're drinking, you realize that it's not just a commodity, that it's like it's representative of this community of people, like people who grow up on coffee farms and are really struggling right now to learn how to farm amidst climate change, and then also make enough money to sustain what they're doing. And like you realize that it's so much bigger. It's a matter of humanity, right? It's not just this thing that like gets us going in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a world of coffee that's bigger than you ever imagined. It's like the world, is bigger. And then by in some respects, like smaller, thanks to Instagram. you have the
connecting
opportunity
dots and
now.
everything.
Yeah, like, I mean, you and I are connected because of Instagram, but we have the opportunity to, you know, DM with the people who farm our coffee in some circumstances. Like,
Absolutely.
I've become really good internet friends with one of my favorite farmers in Mexico because of Instagram.
That's awesome. Yeah, and technology is like crazy. Like, what you're talking about with sustainability, right? That's like a whole other topic and episode. Like, and I'm actually really excited because we're actually gonna have, I don't know if it's gonna be the end of the month. I think the end of the month we're gonna have Long Miles Ben. I'm sure you follow him from Long Miles. He's going to be on the stream, and we're going to be talking with the work that he does for sustainability, which is so cool because, like, with Instagram, we've connected with Ben and their whole team there. I love like their Burundis. I'm like, these are like the best coffees in the world. Like, sorry, go ahead.
The coffee is the best. And I'm convinced that the work that Ben and Christy and the whole Long Miles team does, and not just in Burundi anymore, now they're in Kenya.
Yeah, which is awesome.
I'm telling you, man, I think the work that they're doing in coffee is
incredible. It's incredible.
And they've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, they were doing it before it was cool. And that, you just got me really, really stoked. Like, how do I gift a sub? Can I do that just to celebrate?
You can.
I don't know how Twitch works.
It's not required. No, if you do the subscribe button, it'll like link to like either PayPal or like a card, and then it like subscribes to a month. You don't have to do that.
I got to do something to celebrate.
But it'll be exciting because that is it's a whole other topic about sustainability. It is just incredible.
Hey,
I don't think I have my little alerts here. Danny is giving 1 tier to the Kindness community. Danny, I appreciate it, man. He's like, I could do it.
Yeah, see, Danny knows more about Twitch than I do. One of my best buddies, he's a streamer, much like yourself, like plays the same kinds of games. You guys have a totally similar vibe on Twitch, and I love listening to Jordan talk about Twitch and streaming, and like I get pretty pumped up about it on his behalf, but I don't know anything about it.
No, you're good. Anyway, so that'll be an exciting episode coming up, guys. Sustainability. It's just going to be a fun topic because there's so much levels to it. It's just the work that they do. I'm not kidding. Like Burundi coffees, every time I have a cup of coffee, and it's all about the roaster, right? It's all about the roaster that does it. Like the most coffees that I've had from Long Miles has either been, it's been through Brandywine. I don't know if you've had Brandywine coffee roasters.
Oh, yeah.
But I've had like 2 different coffees from them, and they have been like it's in my freezer still. I know you freeze your coffee, and I freeze my coffee too, but I'm like, I don't want to brew that thing because it's so stinking delicious, man.
Yeah. Whenever Say Coffee in New York gets a hold of Ben's
coffee
from Long Miles too.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
They're a longtime partner. I think they're one of the best roasters in the country. But what they do with those Burundis is really special, and Burundi coffees are
welcome to the
pretty
coffee
unique,
club. We drink all day. We sipping on some coffee and we drink a good. So welcome to the coffee.
They can have this vanilla quality to them, often like a currant or raisin type of acidity or sweetness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And some people really don't like them. Similar to Kenyan coffees, Kenyan coffees are very acidic, and some people just can't vibe with that. But I'm right on board with you, man. Like Burundi coffees, when they're good, oh my gosh, some of my favorites.
And that's a good like when you're in specialty coffee, you begin to realize patterns of origins, right? That certain coffees in this origin will typically have a profile of this, the elevation of this, and that's like, again, it really breaks down to a ton of different like details, right? It's just not like, oh, this is a Colombia, like whatever. Like it there's a lot more detail to it, and that's what I love about specialty coffee is that you begin to dive deeper and deeper and deeper. But one thing that you begin to realize, and it's like what you said. So Kenya coffees for me, I've only had one Kenya coffee from TaylorMade out in Oslo, Norway, which is just crazy. She's so cool. And technology, I've been talking with her for like the last like 2-3 years and seeing her journey and everything like that. And when she did her beta program, I think you did it briefly. When she did her worldwide beta,
when
oh my god,
beta, it was like, it was free international shipping.
Yeah, I'm like $16 done. I'm like,
it was too, like, if you didn't do it, you were losing money pretty sure.
Exactly.
That's how cheap it was. I was like, I have to do this.
She has the only Kenya coffee that I've had that I don't have a quote unquote like reaction to, because like you said, the acidity, people will always say like, oh, Kenyas are like tomatoey or whatever. Like I've had it on espresso, I've had it on like V60 different brewing methods, and Kenyas, they all gave me the same, like, especially if it's on espresso, even if it's like there's like a fine line for me between like a really perfectly extracted espresso, and it's happened many times where I've had it and it's the tomato dirt like acidity. I'm not kidding, like I can't palate it. I just, there's nothing wrong with Kenya coffees because there are some really good ones, but when there's specific crops that fit in that tasting spectrum, I can't do it. I try to do it, I'm like, I'm gonna learn how to taste coffee, and I like take the last of it and I'm like, it's just like, it's just so interesting that there's these consistencies, but it's different for everybody, different reactions to different coffees. But that's been the one that I've noticed, that if it's within that little spectrum of like, oh, this, and Taylor's coffee, I know you probably had it. It was a tomato and basil were the tasting notes. And I'm not kidding. That coffee was like tomato and basil soup. It was like, I was like, wow, this is delicious. This doesn't like, it's not acidic. It's just like sweet and creamy. And it was delicious. Like, it was just like, oh, Taylor's coffees. And I realized this. She roasts on a Loring roaster. And I have mad respect for anything that's roasted, if you can run that machine like Loring. I did not think, I was like, oh, well, all roasting machines and technology are the same and they all have the same tools or similar. But Loring roasters, from the coffees that I've had with people that roast them, like there's a distinctual difference between these coffees, surprisingly.
Yeah. So I remember that coffee like yesterday.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
As you said, came from Taylor made, I knew exactly.
You knew.
The label. But the thing about the roasters is interesting. So Loring is a hybrid roaster.
Right.
And I'm friends with the roaster here in Canada, David from Rabbit Hole Roasters.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen. They have a yellow bag, right?
Mm-hmm, yellow black bag.
With a little bunny.
They switched from a traditional drum roaster to a Loring. But what David did was actually he sent me the same coffee, roasted on both roasters. And it was fascinating to taste them side by side. So they were roasted like within a week or two of each other. Same coffee roasted on two different roasters, and the flavor profile was like notably different.
Interesting.
And not that one was like measurably better than the other. It was just different. One had like a very pronounced acidity that the other one didn't. One was a bit more sweeter than the other. So yeah, it's fascinating. Again, it's that thing, when you don't know anything about how coffee's roasted, it's like, yeah, they're probably all doing the same thing. And then you dip your toe in those waters a little bit and it's like, oh no, this is an art form, this is a craft.
Yeah.
People are hitting this green coffee with heat and it's turning into this thing that I can crush and pour water over and drink. It's pretty wild, man.
Yeah, and for those that are just joining us, I'm loving that chat. People are coming in here. Tempo, never been a big coffee guy, but this is interesting. I've heard that, like, not to put Tempo on the spot, because I'm going to say, Tempo, stay here. I'm literally typing it in. Stay Tempo. Because I've heard that very common, like, oh, I'm not a fan of coffee, or I'm not, this is my experience on coffee. And there's different reasons that people don't like coffee. It could be the caffeine. It could be the bad acidity of it. Like it just tears up people's stomachs, like the caffeine and the mix of that. I've run into people who have tasted coffee, like your typical Folgers type of coffee. Oh, Tempo, Alex here to my left, to your right. He's from Canada. Tempo's from Canada. He's a huge streamer.
Tempo's from Canada.
Yeah, I usually drink tea. That's cool. And we'll talk about that too. And so we're talking, to recap, guys, what we've been talking about tasting notes in coffee. And one of the things I wanted kind of, if you could walk us through, and you can pull it up on your screen if you need to. I was going to pull it up on mine, but I had to change the outputs and everything. But I'm sure that you've seen like, the SCA has used it, but it came from counterculture, the coffee tasting wheel, right? And it goes through like different like kind of like a little spectrum of what you'll taste, or honestly, it's a tool to kind of navigate if you're just starting out, of tasting coffee, right?
Yeah.
It's real simple. Temple, I like that you say tea, like you drink tea. I've had coffees when I've brewed coffees that are super floral, or they've been very tea, like raspberry tea, like different fruity tea that are very, like if you brew it in a way, to me, I'm like, this tastes better than tea because it's got the sweetness of it as if you added honey or that sort of thing. But briefly, just talk about, as a first time drinker, if you were to look at this flavor wheel, what I know you know what I'm talking about, right? The little tasting wheel of exactly. And I'm gonna try to pull it up here so we can see it for reference. But talk about that, like what you're seeing, and I'm gonna pull it up here as you talk about it.
Yeah, I just tried to pull it up, and like I said, I don't know anything about Twitch or
Zoom. No, you're good.
So I wasn't gonna risk it. But yeah, if you want to check it out, I have full confidence that Michael's gonna pull it up. But if he doesn't, you can just search coffee tasting wheel or coffee flavor wheel and go to Google Images, and it's like the only image.
Yeah. There's like different variations, but it's all very much the same.
So basically what it is, it's like this color-coded chart that has colors associated with, flavors. So a strawberry would be red, or a lime would be green, or whatever. And it's a good visual representation of how to approach describing what you're tasting in coffee. So you'll see flavors on there all the way from fruits to vegetables to grains to sugars like, honey or molasses or whatever. It's all kind of there. And like I said earlier, and if you're just jumping on the stream now, we're talking about tasting coffee and how we describe it, the language we use. And I'm convinced that any effort to describe what we're tasting is just an attempt to describe one of three things. It's acidity, body, and sweetness. So let's tackle acidity first. So if you're looking at that flavor wheel, you'll see things like lemon, lime, peach, white grape. Those things are acidic in their own ways. And coffee, the reason we can describe coffee as being acidic is because there are predominantly 4 acids in coffee that are citric acid, like in limes, malic acid, like in peaches, lactic acid, like in yogurt or milk, your favorite milkshake IPA, or acetic acid, which is like vinegar. And so those acids are literally present in coffee, in the fruit. There we go. Now we are talking.
There we go. This is a good representation because like I said, it's a tool that kind of navigates and gives you like a little bit of footing of what you could be tasting. Oh, this tastes like this. And you pull from, like you said, it's very subjective. You pull from your memories of like, oh, this is what lemon tastes like, or this what, but continue.
Totally. And you can see it works from the inside out. So you can be drinking a coffee, let's say a natural Ethiopian coffee that most people would describe as sweet. And the next descriptor they would probably use is fruity. So let's work from the inside out. So we can agree that this coffee is fruity. Why? Because it's sweet. So now we start leaning on our own experiences. Is it citrusy like grapefruit? No. So we're moving towards like berries, dried fruit, or on this flavor wheel, other fruit. And now these are all examples of berries, fruits, dried fruits. And you get to pick from your experiences, your frame of reference. If you've never had a pomegranate before, you can't describe this coffee as tasting like a pomegranate. But you've had peaches or you've had cherries, and this coffee reminds you of the sweetness and the acidity of a peach. So there you go. You can describe this coffee as tasting like peach to you. And the thing is, we need to give ourselves permission to not be wrong, because taste is subjective. It's entirely dependent on the experiences that you've had, the things you've tasted before. And so when people ask me, hey, how do I describe what I'm tasting better, or how do I taste better? My suggestion is, first of all, pay attention to everything you eat and drink, and ask yourself questions. Is this sweet? Is this acidic? Is this bitter? Is this spicy, salty? Why? But my most important piece of advice is just diversify what you eat. So every time I go to the grocery store, I go to the tropical fruit section and I try and find a piece of fruit that I've never had before. So last week it was this thing called an atamoya. I had never heard of it before. It's some hybrid fruit from Brazil, and I'd never had it before. And now that I've had it and I know that it's very, very sweet, I can I have that memory stored, and it's a point of reference. So next time I have a coffee that's super sweet that reminds me like Adamoya, I can say this coffee reminds me of Adamoya. And that's okay if it doesn't remind you of Adamoya because you've never had one. But that's how I kind of diversify my tasting lexicon, I guess, is just by adding to it, adding experiences to it. So yeah, have a look at that flavor wheel. A lot of people will print it out and like put it near where they.
Yeah, I used to do that. I used to do that when I would always pull it up on my phone and I would reference it when I first started drinking coffee of like, oh, okay, this tastes like this. Oh, yeah, this reminds me of peach or whatever. What's cool though, like on that specific chart tempo, you said you like tea, you like tea. So I've had coffees, and I'm sure Alex has had coffees too, that have been like jasmine tea, or I've had ones that are like oolong tea, which I'm at first, when I first had, I'm like, oolong tea. I've never had oolong tea before. And I ended up finding a way to brew a tea bag that was oolong tea. And I brewed it. I'm like, oh my God, this does taste like oolong. That's my reference now. And, there's this whole spectrum of different tasting notes and different things to guide you. Fractal, I do find it hard to distinguish what I'm testing. And a lot of it's time, Fractal. A lot of it is time of you taking the necessary steps and working at it where, like he said, like pay attention to the foods that you're eating. You know, pay attention to the way that you're associated with what you're eating, right? It reminds you of this or reminds you of this, instead of like, especially with like what we were talking about, it's subjective. It's not like this bag of coffee that we brewed, this Geshe, at first when it was like drinkable temperature, right? So I waited for the coffee to cool down. It was that sweetness, but as it cooled down, I got a lot more of like pineapple, tropical fruit, like the sweetness of like, it's like you would describe it. It's not like the first bite of pineapple, but it's like the lingering in your mouth pineapple that you've had. And it's a tropical fruit that's just a very broad spectrum. But again, I pulled from my experience of like, oh yeah. And I'm reminded of like, specifically like there's Brazilian, what is it they're called? In the US, we have like Tucanos, which is a Brazilian grill, I guess you could say. We're just like stacks of meat, and they always do like this grilled pineapple that they feed you with, and you just eat a lot of it because they say it helps you digest better. But they just want to fill you up. It's total bogus. It's a lie. But they give it to you, and it's like the lingering taste of it is what I'm tasting with it. And so a lot of it's just practice. A lot of it's just being familiar, but it really starts with you drinking a good cup of coffee that can even have those possible tasting notes at all. I mean, what I always do when I'm talking with coffee for people who I'm like, let me know where you're at. Let me know where you're located, because I guarantee I can do a Google search, and based on that, like probably like 7 times out of the 10 times, this is like 7 out of 10, there's probably a coffee shop that I've actually had their bag of coffee, which is like crazy to me because I've had just coffee from everywhere. But typically you can look through it, and I love being able to say, oh, okay, Fractal, you live in this place. Let me Google it real fast while I'm streaming. I'll do this while I'm streaming, guys, because I just love it. And I'll look at the different locations around, and I'll suggest a couple places and be like, hey, go to this place. Just go to the counter and say, hey, I'm new to drinking this type of coffee. Can you brew me? Or if they have something that they can, that's really delicious. Like I was recommended by, you don't even have to say who you recommended by, but I was recommended to come here to try this cup of coffee. And typically you'll experience a cup of coffee that you've never really necessarily had before, which is so fun. And then you start there and realize, okay, this is my quality control cup. Right? You have I'm sure you have specific coffee shops that you can go to that you recalibrate like your senses in a way. At least I do. I find a couple coffee shops that I know are reliable. Like I know that they can pull like an amazing espresso on their $12,000 machine, and then I'll come home and I'll try to replicate it on my apartamento, right? A single boiler, and and there's different things that you can do to recalibrate or remember this is your quality control. But Fractal, honestly, it's just finding a place that you can like go to experience a good cup of coffee, like a delicious, flavorful cup of coffee, versus going to Starbucks and getting a Pike's Place. Like, unfortunately, Pike's Place isn't going to be a good starting off point to say, oh, I want to taste more coffee. You have to first experience a good cup of coffee.
And something that I'm learning is that there's actually a limit to what you can taste. and that has to do with actually how many taste buds you have. So I'm just learning about this recently. I'm not a master in this subject area just quite yet, but this came from a lot of conversations I have with people, especially like in real life, not just on the internet, but people I live with who eat food with me a lot or drink drinks with me a lot, and always wonder like how I taste what I taste. And they're like, we're drinking the same wine, or we're sharing the same dish, and like I can't taste what you're tasting. And it led me down this like internet rabbit hole of asking, does everyone have the same potential to taste? And sure enough, what I've learned is that we all have a different measure of taste buds, and you can actually discover how many taste buds you have by doing this test. You can look it up. Just look up like taste bud sensitivity test or whatever. You basically dye your tongue blue with food coloring.
Oh.
Then you take, this sounds crazy, but it's real. You take a piece of paper, you punch out a hole with a hole punch, and then you lay the piece of paper on your tongue with the hole, and you count how many of your taste buds will turn white through the blue dye, and you count how many taste buds you can see in that hole. And that concentration basically gives you a ratio of where you are in the spectrum. So like, do you have a normal amount of taste buds?
Interesting. That's crazy.
A below normal, or do you have above normal, which kind of puts you in what the internet calls the super taster category. And so like, yeah, we can calibrate our senses. We can learn how to perceive acid and sugar and salt, absolutely, and all these things. We can do that, but we all have a ceiling, which I didn't know, to what we can taste based off of how many taste buds we biologically have. So
what we're gonna do next, guys, we're gonna dye our tongues blue. I'll have to like grab more information because I'd be curious as well. I mean, so when I got I got COVID like in April or March, and I lost my coffee taste. I lost my tasting anything for like a good 2.5 months. Thankfully it came back, but that whole time I was not like, when I first discovered I lost my taste, I'm like, these salt and vinegar chips are not as vinegary as I remember. And then sure enough, I'm like, oh, this pickle is not like a pickle at all. And so I was like, oh no, cups of coffee. That was like my first thought. I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to taste coffee this sucks. Yeah. But it's like you said, not like you said, but like what you're talking about is like there's a ceiling for everybody and what they've tasted, and that comes back to being subjective. Like if you grew up and you never had a blueberry pie, then you have no framework for the blueberry sweetness, for the crusty, like you have the crusty, crispy, like buttery, flakery, you have no reference for what that tastes like. And when it comes to coffee, then when you're trying, you'd be like, I don't know what this really tastes like. It may be there, but like you just have no framework for it. But that's interesting that they did a test like that. I feel like that'd be a test that they do forever ago. Like that's a cool way to I want to try that out. And
yeah, I actually haven't done it yet. I just learned about this recently, so I haven't done it. I posted a link in the chat from one of my favorite websites, Wine Folly.
That's awesome.
So yeah, maybe we should do it live. That'd be good.
That'd be crazy. I have a tongue cam now.
Yeah,
I'll have to try it. Perfect. Let me just pull this up real fast. Again, guys, we've been talking to Mr. Alexander Mills. Again, he loves coffee. And to bring this back of why I'm like, Gamer Temple says do it live. I don't know if I can put my tongue on there. Next week, tongue cam. I don't know if anybody wants to see anybody's tongue.
Oh man, that's the kind of thing that would like go off on Twitch.
My gosh, I don't. Wow.
There'd be some weird niche where people are like, yeah, I'm super into this.
Yeah, don't even bring it up because do it live. Maybe we'll be tempted to do it. Tongue cam. Okay.
They shut down your channel. Be like, you violated the terms and conditions.
If they violate me, people know who's streaming on Twitch. If they violate me for showing my tongue, we got issues because they show.
I've heard there's some weird stuff going on Twitch nowadays with kiddie pools and stuff. So we don't even need to get into it. Jeez.
I'm like, if they attack me, then they got issues.
Yeah.
But again, guys, we've been talking to. We'll do like a wrap up here, guys, because this has just been a fun episode. talking with Alexander Mills. He's based out in Canada. He has a coffee blog. Link it in there if you want to. Link it in there because I'll type it. I was going to do a command there, but his blog is filled with tons of tools and resources to the home brewer, which is what I am about. I'm about changing people's lives and connecting and networking with people who want a better cup of coffee at their house. It really does like change lives. Like I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed sharing a cup of coffee, the knowledge that I know and the experience that I know with people and changing their lives. Like my brother, for example, when we started doing specialty coffee, like I was going to start the story, but my brother and sister had no reference for coffee. So we ended up visiting. Every time we'd go to Colorado, we'd visit a coffee shop because I wanted to hit Huckleberry. I wanted to hit Queen City, Corvus, Middle State, all of these places. And I began taking them with me and saying, hey, this is a good cup of coffee. And they began to like embrace it and be curious. And my brother, when we were last there, he was telling us at Sweet Bloom, he's like, yeah, we went in here and we were talking to the barista for like 20 minutes just about different coffees that they had and different. I'm like, that's so cool that you had the courage and curiosity to go to a coffee shop and ask these questions, because you know what? They offered advice. They said, hey, this is what we have. And they just had a really cool conversation. But it really is about equipping people and home brewers to enjoy a cup of coffee. That's my passion. I know Alex shares that with what he's doing, and he's got his mobile coffee shop, and that's so awesome. So link your Instagram in there too, or I can do it if you want to type it in. But while you're doing that, guys, as we wrap up, this has been the Coffee Lab episode 2, Tasting Notes of Coffee. We went over basically just a fun and exciting way to look at coffee and tasting coffee, that it's all subjective to your experience, that you based on your experience of coffee, that you're able to tie the dots of this tastes like this, or this tastes like this. It's just a fun and easy, relaxed way to approach coffee if you've never approached coffee to begin with. And I hope that it sparks curiosity. Just last words, Alex, what are some things that you may have coming up? You don't have to reveal too much information, but you're always doing exciting stuff on Instagram. That's the way that I connected with you, and you really share the majority of your information, daily life there with coffee. Like, what are some things that you're excited for this year, and what can we expect from you?
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity, man. I was on a pretty rapid pace there. I'm just doing a bunch of stuff, and I've settled in right now this year and this season into my biggest project, which is launching a coffee trailer, which has just been a blast, but obviously my biggest undertaking. So it's taken a lot of time, energy. It's been, I love Instagram. I love the coffee community on Instagram. I love that you and I connected on Instagram. But I really felt compelled to do something locally. Like, I needed to serve people that I actually live with, not to discredit the connections I have online. But I live here in Niagara, right? And people in Niagara need great coffee. So that's where Groundswell kind of fits into everything. And so that's where a lot of my time and effort is going right now. And it's been so much fun. So when I'm not working in the trailer, I'm working on, featured beverages. We just finished serving cold brew lemonade, which people really resonated with. So that's here locally in Niagara, but online I'm working on something that is kind of I think it's going to be a never-ending project, which is it's a library of coffee varieties, and it's a visual library. And this was inspired by a leaderboard. It's this coffee game, and to be very brief, leaderboard. They send you 10 coffees that are unmarked, and you basically have to fill out this quiz of like, where do you think this coffee's from? How was it roasted? How high was it grown? And one of the questions, and one of the hardest questions for folks, is what variety is it? And this goes back to how we started talking at all, which is how people shop wine by varieties, but very few people shop coffee by varieties. And so in an effort to like increase that literacy, I'm documenting every coffee that I drink. I'm taking pictures of every bean, and I'm logging it visually on my site into this, I call it a variety library. And there's over 50 varieties logged right there, and I'm about to add.
Yeah, there's like so many variations and so many, like, when it comes to varieties, it's like a whole nother world. Like, it's like, I don't even look at the variety because I'm like, there's only a couple that I know for sure. Like I love pea berries. Like I love pea berries. They're super tiny. I love them. They're very consistent. Perfect. And then you have like Panama, or you have like bourbons that are gigantic beans. Like those are the only two that I can distinguishedly say like, oh, this is this or this is this, because there's not really another style of pea berry. Like pea berries are just so tiny. Which is cool because it would be great to have you again for a future episode when we're down the line and way more educated, because again, varietals is just a whole nother ballpark, but it's so cool just to see. It'll be cool to see kind of your journey of logging and kind of the things that you've encountered and learned and networked with people creating this library, because that's like, it's a lot of work, and it's going to be something that's really cool to see the flourishing, the seeds that you're planting with all that coffee documentation.
It seems to really be resonating with folks. It seemed to be really helpful, which is good, because it was a lot of work to get it up off the ground. And as soon as I published it, I was like, I really hope that somebody likes this, because that was a lot of work.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of work.
And it's resonated with a lot of people. So I'm pretty excited to keep it rolling and keep expanding the library. But yeah, man, that's what we got. A newborn at home, so he's keeping us.
I don't doubt it.
And it's summertime, so spending lots of time outside. It's all good, man. So I just want to take a quick moment to thank you again for
of course,
having me on here.
Thank you.
Valuing my presence and our friendship and I just really like what you're doing here on Twitch. And
thank you.
If I'm gonna watch any game on Twitch, it's Apex. So I'm glad that you stream that. So I have to watch the kind of own noobs on there too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, go follow him on Instagram. Go follow him. Subscribe to his email if you're curious about the different resources he has on there. This is going to wrap up the Coffee Lab episode 2. Episode 3, like I said, I released it earlier with Long Miles. They are I don't even know, they're not really a company, it's more like an organization. They work with farms in Burundi, now in Kenya. Was that what it was?
Yeah, Kenya, and I think Uganda now.
Yeah, I knew it was another one, but they like ground level with coffee farms and their tools, and they've been doing it for so long. I am really excited to have Ben on the stream with that. So definitely looking out a date. Be sure to follow, guys, my Twitter as well, because that's kind of when we release when we're going to have our next episode. We try to advertise like a week and a half out. We're working with some dates with him to get that all situated, but that's another episode I'm really excited for, because again, it's about sustainability. People don't think about this when they think about specialty coffee or are aware of it, but it's a whole nother level when it comes to specialty coffee and the work that coffee shops do or importers do with coffee farms to make it sustainable, livable wages, the environment, the culture, and all that. It's not to those importers and to the roasters that me and you work with, Alex, or we chat with. It's all about sustainability and like ethical, and like it goes far beyond this idea of you look on a bag and it says fair trade. Like there's so much work that goes behind working with coffee farms that are sustainable and profitable, and they living wages, and they're producing this like there's a whole other wave. Like it just cracks open. It's very hard to simplify it, the work that they do with specific, and there's like women-owned co-ops that they work with too, and it's like so cool because it's just such cool work, and I'm excited for that episode. But again, guys, you can follow here on Twitch, follow the Twitter, on IG as well as on YouTube. This episode will be on YouTube shortly tonight. To recap it, again, Alex, thank you so much for being here. In about an hour or so, guys, we'll be back streaming live, a fresh new stream for Apex tonight. Just having some fun and talking coffee if it's brought up again. But I've just been enjoying this opportunity to you guys building a community around specialty coffee as well as gaming, because those are my two worlds colliding. I love coffee and sharing about coffee, and it's just, I don't know, it's just fun. I know you like sharing coffee, so it's just like, it's just enjoyable. It's just a way of life at this point.
Yeah.
This is just funny. It's like, I'm sure you've done this. Like I've taken my Carter into like breakfast places and have like poured my own coffee. I literally did it when we were in Colorado. This is just a funny story. And you can share how far you've shared your coffee, but I brought it we were in Kansas City doing a conference for my full-time job in the automotive industry. And I brought it to my table and we were serving, but this was like the week before COVID actually broke out. Like we were in Kansas City and they were starting to shut the airports that day, like literally that next day, they shut down the airports. I ended up having my Carter coffee mug, which is like a little thermos mug. And I brought it to the buffet breakfast in the hotel, and I'm here drinking it, and I'm sharing it with the waiter that's helping me, because he's like, what do you have in your coffee? I'm like, oh, it's this coffee. It's delicious. Like, you got to try. Can I give you some? I promise. I'm like justifying. I promise I don't drink from the Carter. I pour it into this. Like, you want to try some. And so he tries it and he's like, oh my gosh, this is like an amazing cup of coffee. And so just to random strangers, it's fine. I justify. I'm like, I swear I don't drink from the Carter. I pour it in and I don't put my mouth on it. Like, it's clean. Like, you got to try this.
I can't say I've ever done that, but
you haven't. You got to try it. It's exhilarating.
Yeah. I think the greatest extent I've ever gone to like supply my own coffee was at like 30,000 feet. I was in an airplane and I had my coffee, my scale, my hand grinder on my
oh my gosh, the whole thing.
Carry-on. And so the lady, the flight attendant was coming by and she's like, you want tea or coffee? And I was like,
you're like hot water.
But I do want hot water. And so she gave me hot water and that's all I needed. I had all the other ingredients and I made an aeropress right there. I'm like, I was so annoying. Just like, I'm that guy.
It takes like a minute to grind it.
Right there, yeah.
See, when I've traveled and been asking for like hot water, it's when I've had Voila, like the instant coffee. I don't know if you've had them.
I was brewing this.
This was before,
like 8 years ago. Today, I just bring instant coffee everywhere.
And that's a whole nother topic too. God, there's so many episodes. Okay, that's it for today, guys. We're just dragging on. But that's awesome. I would do that too. I would bring my grinder and. You kidding me? I would do that at work.
No shame in this game.
No shame. No. I shared coffee with my whole office because they had poopy coffee and it changed their lives. And it got to the point where I would come in to get ready to grind the coffee like a Chemex, like a good old 80-gram batch. And literally people would be like, hey, let me grind that for you. I'll grind it for you. Like, will you brew coffee? I'll grind it. So I'm like, here you go. And so I don't even have to grind the coffee when All right, guys. Again, we'll be back in an hour playing some Apex. Alex, thank you so much. We will be talking after this and I appreciate your time.